Bring to us your poetry from inspiration sought. Come join us with your images, your verses, words, and thought. From here, we'll share your balladry with those who do not know it. This platform's here for you to show the world that you're the poet.
Welcome to episode 42 of You're the Poet, the poetry podcast featuring you. I'm host Matt Burgio, and I'm here with co-host Phil Burgio. Phil, welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for the donuts this morning.
You're welcome. Here at You're the Poet, our purpose is to share our love of poetry with the world and invite you to do the same. I want to start by saying thank you to all of our listeners who have made You're the Poet possible. We hope you enjoy the podcast and the poetry that is shared here. Our featured guest for this episode of You're the Poet is Jay Michaelsen, who's joining us from Norway. Jay Michaelsen, welcome.
Thank you.
And we're glad you could join us, and we look forward to your contribution to the episode.
Yeah, so am I.
To start things off, I'm going to read a classic poem for the episode. This poem is by American poet Ellen Sturgis Hooper. She was born in 1812 in Boston, Massachusetts, and died in 1848 there. She was part of the Transcendental movement and a member of the Transcendental Club. That was a philosophical movement here in America that featured on individualism, and they respected and did a lot with nature. She was a member of that club and really involved in the Transcendental movement. Her poetry was regularly commissioned by Ralph Waldo Emerson for The Dial, which was the publication of the Transcendental Club. And she was regarded as one of the most gifted poets among the New England Transcendentalists. Sadly, she died young at the age of 36 from tuberculosis. So a lot of people were saddened about that and wondered what she would have contributed had she lived longer. I'm going to share a poem by her today called I Slept and Dreamed That Life Was Beauty. I slept and dreamed that life was beauty. I woke and found that life was duty. Was thy dream then a shadowy lie? Toil on, sad heart, courageously, and thou shalt find thy dream to be a noonday light and truth to thee. Ellen Sturgis Hooper. So short poem, but I like what it has to say there.
Yeah, I'm aware of the Transcendental Movement and the Dial and Emerson. Don't know if I ever heard of this lady, other than I probably read her poems and didn't give it any thought about her.
Well, that's one of the things I like to do is find a little more of the obscure poets and highlight them a little bit. Because, you talk about the Transcendental Movement, of course, most people will be like, well, yeah, I've heard of Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he gets a lot of attention. So I wanted to pull out one of the lesser known ones, at least to the common people, and share that.
No, I first time listening to it. So I've heard of the lady before on this podcast, and she has a lot. I have to read up on her.
Yeah, this is a new one for us. So you can definitely read more about her. Although on the Wikipedia site that I was looking at, there wasn't a whole lot of info on her life. Give a little bit of background. I did like this poem because I like the idea of that, in her sleep, she's dreaming that life was beautiful, but upon waking up, you realize that, all the duties of life and things, but then that call for courage, you can make that light and truth. Dream can be real. I like that concept there.
That's a big thing.
I get the feeling that when she wrote this poem, she knew she had tuberculosis. It just has that feeling that, she's sad and she knows it's not going to end well.
I think this poem was written around 1840, so about within the last 8 years of her life. I don't know how soon the onset was, but I could see where it sort of has that feeling and that wanting to tell yourself to live life to the fullest, kind of. All right, well, from there, we're going to turn it over to Phil to share his poem for the episode. Phil?
Yeah, this poem I wrote because I couldn't think of anything to write about. For a couple of days, I'm thinking I should write a new poem, and I just where's my muse? I mean, what am I going to write about? So this poem is called Not Today. I tried to write a poem today, but no ideas came my way. No muse to give me pause for thought. Nothing came, nothing wrought. No thoughts of nature, no country view. No green landscapes, no skies of blue. Nary a thought of childhood past, or of a love that will always last. It's been a while since my mind went blank, or into darkness my memory sank. Nothing here to write or rhyme. It will have to be another time. I will have to wait for another day. I will have to find a different way. Philip Burgio.
All right, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I like what you did there, and I like how even though you've got the writer's block, that you come up with all these things that sort of inspire the creation of the poem.
I really loved it. I know all about writer's block. I've had it for the last 5 years, so it tells me that even though you have a writer's block, you can do it.
Mm.
So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks you for liking it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sort of reminded me of that poem I read, that need to write. That it's like, I want to write something, but it's like nothing's coming to mind, so I'm just going to sit down and write whatever's going on at the time. I like that. All right, from here, I'm going to share a poem for the episode. Decided to share this poem because I had shared a while back my poem Snow Snakes, and this poem follows the same form, which is a form that I feel like I created, even though I'm like 95% sure I created the form. It may be out there somewhere, so apologies to any poets that might have written it before, but it's a 3-stanza poem of iambic tetrameter that follows a certain rhyme scheme of A, B, A, B, B, C, C, B, B, A, B, A. It has this repetitive feature to it where the first and third stanzas, the lines are basically flipped. So the poem comes full circle on itself. And I've been trying to come up with a name, like either a wave or a loop poem, but I haven't settled on a name for the form. But anyway, this is my poem, Where You End and I Begin. It's us that makes the world spin, entangled in our lover's state. And where you end and I begin is bound by love in line with fate. We lay there in a figure 8, wrapped up as one as close we lay. We'll make forever of this day, as both our hearts with love we sate. It's bound by love in line with fate, this where you end and I begin. Entangled in our lover's state, it's us that makes the world spin. Matthew Burgio.
I wouldn't know where to start with naming that poem. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, like I said, about a name, but I thought the topic of this poem was good because if you're familiar with the infinity symbol and that figure 8 sideways, that's kind of what I was trying to capture in the poem. And I thought this form that kind of comes full circle in this loop fit that well.
Yeah, I think I wrote something about it earlier today, that many writers, they stop writing because they think everything has to have this and this form, it has to rhyme this and this way, but it's so many forms to write. And you show it, both of you guys show it. I hope I can show it. I love it.
Thank you. I did see that you posted that, encouraging poets to not get caught up in like, oh, your poem has to rhyme, that there's all kinds of poetry out there. I did see that earlier.
Yeah, good.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I like to rhyme my poetry. I think of it as a puzzle. I've written free verse before, but I like to play around with the rhymes. Like I said, it's a puzzle for me, and I like doing puzzles.
Yeah, it could be a challenge and a creative way to look at it. All right, from here, we're going to move to our guest portion of the episode. Jay Michaelsen, you're the poet. Show us what you've got.
Thank you, guys. Well, as we talked about, I have this Norwegian poem that I tried to interpret into English. We have the same alphabet, almost the same syllables, except we have 3 more. But even though our language is so much poorer, yeah, even poorer than our neighbors, Sweden. But I know we have a lot of Norwegians living in America.
Oh, yeah.
Probably some of them are listening, so who knows?
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. Especially in the Midwest, I think.
Yeah, upper Midwest, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. This is a really dark one. I write a lot of dark poetry. This one is from my first 3 poems I wrote ever. 3 wrote poems that just came down in 15 minutes. Didn't know where it come from, didn't know I could write. Okay, so here we go. De dystre tanker nå. Livet over, det går nok mot slutten. Borte mannen og den lille gutten. Målet mørkt, et mørkt hull, da blir jeg jo borte. Da kan de si han har endelig gjort det. Folk sier det dårlig gjort å avslutte sånn. Men hva gjør jeg da, når livet på bånd? Jeg kaller dette diktet, de dystre tanker nå. Legger ned pennen, styggen banker på. J. Michaelsen.
All right, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I have no idea what you said there, except that I have the English translation here.
But wait, there's more, right?
So I'll say at this point that I like the flow of it, though. I like the way it sounds. And I don't know for me if that's just the language because I'm not too familiar with it, or that in combination with the flow of the poetry. So one of the things we talked about, I know what got me excited about having you on the podcast initially was the fact that you had shared that you had written this poem in Norwegian and that you wanted to publish it in English. And so you had your English translation. And we had just talked about in the previous episode how I feel that there's something lost in translation, that poetry is such an art that has to do with sounds and syllables and imagery that I feel like there's got to be something lost in translation. And so I thought, well, this would be great. Here's a poet who's done both the Norwegian and the English. I thought it'd be great to have you on here and you could kind of explain how that process was for you. Now, you speak pretty good English.
Thank you.
We mentioned that you do a good job there. And so I'd like to hear, we're going to have you share the English first, and then you can talk about how the process was. So if you don't mind, if you could give us the English rendition of this.
Of course I will. My darkest thoughts now. My life is over, the end is near. Gone is the man and the little boy as well. My end goal is the utter darkness, only then I will be gone. Then they can say he finally did it. People say it's a bad thing to end a life like that, but what can I do when all I feel is emptiness? I call this poem my darkest thoughts. I'll lay down my pen now. My darkness is knocking. J. Michaelsen.
All right. Thank you for sharing.
That flowed really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like the
Yeah.
flow of it. Like you said, there's a dark theme. Sounds like some suicidal thoughts there and some depression.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about it. I'll turn it over to you and let you tell us a little bit about the poem, but also about the process of translating it into English.
You know, in the Norwegian, in the original, it's kind of rhymes like the perfect build-up. It was my first poem ever. I didn't know where it came from except from my darkest thoughts. I was hospitalized in a mental institution because I tried to end my life. And on day 4, like, I just had to run to the room and have something I have to write down, and pop 3 of them. But this means a lot to me, so I thought a few weeks later I should try to interpret this in English. But how can you interpret a rhymed Norwegian poem into English? It's impossible because we have different sounds, and the word build up. So I just interpreted the best way I could, really.
It's like you went from a rhyming poem to a free verse poem, and it worked. Both poems work.
Thank you.
Last episode, I wrote a poem by Jules Verne, the English translation, and the same thing, no rhymes and all that. And then I had a little bit of background in French, so I read it in French, and you can see the rhymes and the different flow.
Yeah. I listened earlier today. You guys actually talked about how you took English and French together. I don't remember exactly which episode it was, but it's early on. And I was just, wow, I see.
Yeah, that was episode 4 with Mark McDermott. Yeah.
Yeah. It was.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, you did a great job with this, especially for being an early poem. You said this was like one of your first 3 poems you ever wrote. Thought you did a great job with that.
Good job.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for talking a little bit to us about the translation and stuff. And I know, especially with a dark topic, that could be rough, but we're glad you've bounced back and that you've taken this poetry thing full swing. I've been enjoying reading some of your works there. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on. I think you mentioned you had a book out at some point, right?
Yeah, I think it was in 2020. I was in the drug rehabilitation, and that was maybe 3 months after this psychiatric episode. I decided to once again try to turn my life around and never give up,
Good.
Can't.
Yeah, nice. I know you're in the process of it a little bit already because you've mentioned a few things, but tell us a little bit about your poetic journey. So you told us about the start, how you started while you were doing some of the rehab and things. So tell us about how the journey's progressed.
Yeah, once again, one day I just felt something was cooking under my skin, inside my head. Bubbles of words. I started with 1 syllable and I couldn't stop. I actually wrote the whole book in a month. I used Instagram, tried a few live shows where I told people to give me a word, and I tried to write a poem about it. Elephant in the room, everything. I couldn't stop. It was scary.
That's awesome, though.
But then I finished the book, what was going to be the book, and suddenly it stopped. I had a relapse once again, back to recreational drugs and stuff like that. A lot of psychotic episodes, all that kinds of things. I had to use medication, and that's not good if you want to have free thoughts. So I was in a prison.
Yeah.
Never been in a real prison, but inside my head.
Sometimes that could be the worst one.
Yeah.
Would you say that poetry kind of helped with your rehabilitation?
Oh, yeah. I felt like a king. Because I used Instagram, and we have some famous Norwegian authors. I got recognition from those guys.
Ah, good.
And I thought, maybe I got something.
Ah,
Yeah.
well, you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, from this being one of the early attempts at poetry, I thought you captured it right away. So excited to see where you go with that and what you do with it. You said you've been listening to some of the other episodes. I'll put a plug out here, not just for you, but for our listeners as well, that if you are struggling with things, whether it's drug addiction, I know the episode with Richard Ebner, he talks about he works with a group called the Virtual Services Network. They've got a website with a bunch of resources and support and ways to help with addiction, whether it be drugs or alcohol or other things. And we'll share a link with that. And then our returning guest, A. Benedict, who's been on episode 9 and 24 and joined us for our Around the Table. He works in suicide prevention. So there is help out there for people that are having these dark thoughts and things or struggling with drugs or alcohol or other problems. So we'll share some links for our audience that if you need some help, there's help out there. You're not in this battle alone. There are people out there that will support you and help you out. Jay Michaelsen, I'm glad that you found poetry as a way to get through some of that. I know that's been true for some of our other guests as well that have gone through some traumatic things, whether it's been abuse or addiction or whatever. All right, well.
Got another one for us?
Of course I do.
Go for it.
I picked one since we're on the topic of the struggles from childhood, abusive things, addiction. It's not 100% me, but I know myself when I read it. But some of the things are a little fictional.
Poetic license, right?
What?
Poetic license. It's an English term.
Oh, okay.
Meaning that as the creator, the author, you've got the freedom to change things and add things.
Yeah. Totally freedom. Okay, so here we go.
Go for it.
I know a story about this young boy, born into darkness without the hope of joy. From a young age he was left all alone, barely no clothes, not even one toy. He grew up without a mother's love, no one to care for him. He hoped for some help from above, but not even God was fair to him. So when he got older, lived a life as a criminal. He had no hope for another life. He thought, and he grew even bolder. To eat or be eaten, that was his phrase. He said it convincing with a cold and dark gaze. One day the boy woke up, now 40 years older, tired of the life, a heavy weight on his shoulder. I have to find a new way, he said to himself. Write another story, fill up this empty bookshelf. Right now he's sitting writing this poem, has turned his life around, now people want to know him. What will happen in the future, no one really knows. He's finished with his old ways, and now it really shows. Jay Michaelsen.
All right, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I'll tell you what, this is very reminiscent of one of the poems that Simon Drake shared with us. So when you get to episode 11, I think you'll connect with some of the content there that Simon shares.
All right.
He's got a poem the topic is like spot on about how this one sounds. Very well written, though.
Yeah.
I really like that. He said to himself, write another story, fill up this empty bookshelf.
Yeah, I used that bookshelf thing in other things as well.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I like that poem.
Thanks.
And before I forget, how do you say one beer, please, in Norwegian?
En øl, takk.
Okay.
Or you can say, can I have a beer? Gi meg en øl, da.
Okay. Because nice. I do like beer. I've actually wrote several poems about beer.
So I have to read those.
They're in there somewhere, yeah.
Good.
Nice. All right, well, before we continue and wrap up the episode, is there anything else you want to say about poetry or the journey or anything?
Yeah, I wrote down some thoughts when we agreed on this, because I thought back when I was dealing with, especially in the beginning, the psychotic things. I didn't have contact with my own feelings. A few thoughts, if I may.
Yeah,
Sure.
for sure.
The problem with subconscious feelings. My writing was the only way I could express them. How can you express something at all when you don't even know who or what you are? Have spent the last 5 years in constant battle, wanted to die every day. Didn't even dare to look in the mirror.
Yeah, I like that. The how do you express yourself when you don't even know who you are? I think that's a good sentiment there. Like, it's something to think about.
Was that just a comment or a poem? Because it sounded like a poem.
That's a thought.
Just thoughts, but
Okay.
it was very poetic,
Poetic thoughts. I
the way
like
you
that.
shared that.
I must say, we talked a little bit, a little teary-eyed for me when I found out it was you and your dad. I come from a family with three published authors, one with several books about the history in Norway during the Second World War, the sailors. And then we have me and my father's aunt. She published a book just a few months before she died, now this spring, and she got it published. So I'm glad that I got it. Yeah. And my dad wrote when he was younger. That's why I asked you, is it you and your dad, right? And you said, yeah. I got choked because that would have been a dream for me. I talked to my mom the other day, and we actually have his sheets with the poems. So I'm going to publish another book, and then I want to use some of his as well as a tribute.
Now you're making me teary-eyed.
I tell you what, it is a dream for me. My dad's always been my hero, my positive role model, and best friend, and he was even the best man in my wedding. And I wanted to say sorry to hear about your dad. I know you mentioned he had recently passed.
Thank you.
When you do get this book together, or the next time you're on the show, maybe you could share some of his poetry.
Oh, that would be good.
Although I'm going to guess it's in Norwegian.
Yeah.
It's okay either way.
So sometime next year, I can send you a Norwegian course.
Okay.
Might start picking up on my Duolingo here and start learning some Norwegian.
Yeah. Awesome.
So where can our listeners find you online? You said you have an Instagram account. Tell us where they can find you on Instagram.
Well, on Instagram, I call myself the Norwegian Artist 79.
Okay. Yeah, I see it there. _Norwegian_artist79.
Yeah.
We'll definitely share a link there so our listeners can find you and check out what you're doing on Instagram.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, from there, we're going to continue on with the episode. Don't have any direct quoted feedback, but we've gotten a lot of positive feedback on our Around the Table. Phil, you said you had some people mention some stuff about that.
My friend Jim up in Cleveland said, well done. The only comment he had is I got up and left because I was having an allergy attack. And he was asking me why I got up and left. He's very curious. That was basically his feedback, other than he says he really liked the format.
I liked watching you just fade into the distance as you left the episode. And then slowly returned. And we also got a lot of positive feedback from the guests that took part of our Around the Table. A lot of them thought it was a great opportunity and they enjoyed interacting with the other guests. So that is something we'll definitely be doing in the future. So listeners out there, be on the lookout for Around the Table 2, which will be coming out sometime in the next few episodes, maybe 45. We'll see. All right. Well, as we wrap things up, we want to let our listeners know we are grateful that you've taken the time to tune in. We hope you're enjoying the poetry shared here. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with others. If you would like to support You're the Poet and what we are doing here, we have set up a patron site at buymeacoffee.com/you'rethepoet. Thank you for your support as we continue to grow. If you've written any poetry and you want to share it here, whether you just have an interest in poetry, consider yourself an amateur poet, or are a professional poet with published works, contact us to be a guest on a future episode. Please check out our website and various social media outlets to keep up to date with You're the Poet. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and our website, you'rethepoet.com. Until next time, Phil, thanks for joining us.
Anytime.
Jay Michaelsen, thanks for being our guest.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, thank you guys. Goodbye.